I'm Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio. A couple of months ago I mentioned giving you a tour of my studio, and I thought today would just be a good time to do it. I spent the weekend cleaning and kind of organizing things a little bit, and so I thought I'd show you what it looks like at the moment. I filmed this a couple of times, and I went around my studio as a walking tour, and I was holding the camera, and when I sat down to edit the video I got motion sick. I just do not do well carrying the camera around, so I'm just going to do this with the camera stable and just do the best I can with just panning and zooming in, and hopefully you'll get the feel for the studio. Okay, here's a view of my studio as I come down the basement stairs, and the gammal takes up a lot of the room because it's a 14-foot table, so it's pretty long. But you can see I have a window right back there. It's evening time now, it's 8 o'clock at night, so there's no light coming through, but I have a window there, and then I have a window in my exterior door, so I get some natural light in. And then I have the bookcase over here, or the metal storage shelves, and that's where I store my projects, and I'll give you a closer view of that later. But there's my gammal, and it is a Gammal Classic Plus. I bought it as a Classic in 2002, and then I upgraded it to a Plus machine in 2009, so it is stitch regulated. And then in 2015 I added a sitter stand addition to the table so I can sit down and quilt. And here I have that second double wedding ring quilt on there, so this one's going a little bit better than the other one, so I'm hoping that that will be a successful quilt. And on the floor I have anti-fatigue mats because I do have a concrete floor, so I use those anti-fatigue mats, and those are on both sides of the machine plus in front of my cutting table. And to the right of the door I have my design wall, and it has the cat's cradle quilt on it at the moment, and I have that corner pulled up and pinned because there is an electric outlet down there, so I keep that pinned up so that it doesn't cause a fire hazard. And then I have my ironing board there, and I'll show you more of a close-up of that in just a second too. And you can see some of the tools I have on there. I have this is like a vegetable cleaning brush. I use that to brush chalk off the quilt. And then I have some of my rulers that I use, templates, and there's some embroidery hoops I keep up there. And you know, just kind of odds and ends. A pair of scissors I use for trimming threads off of the Bobbin Winder, which is right there. There's my off-board Bobbin Winder. That's right there. And so I use that, and you can see the vent pipes coming out from my clothes dryer, so I have to work around that kind of noise. And I have a couple of bookcases here that I have quilting books and magazines and stuff in. Now here's where I have my television. I don't use it a whole lot. Most of the time if I'm using it, it's not watching television as much as it is popping in a DVD and watching a movie or something. I like the older movies, and so I watch some classics. And then I have well, there's the router there, and then there's a DVD player, and then I have some beading supplies there. And then on the floor in front of it at the moment I have my serger, because I don't have a good place to keep that sitting out, so it's on the floor at the moment until I figure that out. That's one of the things I've been trying to find a place for it where it could sit out so that I can use it more often, but I don't have that ability right now. There's my Singer 1591, and that stays open all the time. And then to the right of that, right in there, is a set of drawers that I have my sewing supplies in, like bobbins, and thread and scissors and zippers and elastic, just basic sewing supplies. I have my pin cushion, and then I have those fabric baskets that I've made, and they have scissors and hand sewing needles and some clips and stuff in it. And at the moment on this table I have that first double wedding ring quilt. It's sitting there waiting for its binding. I have a little art quilt on the wall that I haven't quilted yet, and then above that I have a color wheel and my clock and just a couple notes for me. And I have the cat's cradle quilt there. And I'm going to show you when I was talking about the outlet. See, there's an electrical outlet in here. And so I keep that quilt pinned up so that it's not covering that, because I don't need a electrical or fire hazard. So that is kind of the best fix for that at the moment. And then I'll give you a little closer view of my other storage shelves, and then I'll show you where I store my fabric. Here's a little closer view of my storage shelving here. This top shelf way up here is odds and ends things that I'm not using, a couple of storage containers, and then I have some upholstery samples up in this corner up here. I haven't done anything with those, and then I just have a couple of odds and end things up there. Over here in this blue container is a bunch of different types of glue. I use a lot of kids glue for basting fabric, so there's mostly that in there, and there's liquid glue and stick glue. And then these two bolts of fabric, one is a cotton fabric for backings, and then the other one is prepared for dyeing fabric, and I've got that there for the next time I decide I want to dye some fabric. And then these containers here are projects in there, quilting projects. This basket is tools for putting eyelets in projects, and then I have more projects over there. So most of my storage containers for my quilting projects, I try to keep them in these containers that have the lids on it, like in this shelf here. And I don't have labels on them because I can see through those, and I know what's in there. But then I have some of the smaller projects in these shallower bins, and this one actually has interfacing in it, and this one has Peltex in it, so there's odds and ends in there. And then that pencil case has safety pins in it for pin basting quilts, like when you do hand quilting, you pin baste, so that's what those are. And then on the bottom there's more project bins, and then this has odds and ends of batting that I've cut off of quilts as I was quilting them. And then over here, this is a bag of fabric for that my friend gave me to make those butterfly quilts, and I need to get that back to her, so that is sitting there until I can get that back to her. Now my cutting board is to the left, and it is a cutting, well, my cutting table is to the left, and it is an old drafting table, and it was like a state surplus thing that my husband bought for me. And I've got more batting odds and ends stored down there, and on the top I have, right there is a tape measure that I just have taped down with Scotch tape, and I use that for measuring backings of quilts, you know, the fabric for the backings. And then I have 3 different cutting mats on there, and my right now I have a rotary cutter on there, and then I have my calculator and a couple square rulers, and that is 2 pieces of backing fabric for future quilt projects. Now this cutting table has drawers, and I have tools in the top 2 drawers, and then on the bottom is it's a file cabinet, so there's files in there. In between those to items, there's a folding table, and I was using that for my sewing machine for a long time when I was using my Viking 500, and I also had my Serger on that at the time. What I found though is that the vibration of the sewing machine would bounce that table, so it didn't work as well as I hoped it would, and also it's a 6-foot table, so it was sitting next to where my Singer 1591 is sitting now. It was sitting there, and it was covering up too much of my design board, so I took that down, and now I'm just using the 1591 at the moment. So I'm going to adjust the camera, and I want to show you my thread and my fabric storage. And underneath the quilting table in the back is where I store my thread and my fabric. And down through here, at the very bottom, is where I keep tools and like the wrenches for the machine. I have some spare parts like light bulbs and check springs and those kinds of things. They're all down in here. And then starting the one up above that, these two are threads, and then I have threads all in this section, or well, I guess just in this top drawer. These two have pantographs in it, which I really need to kind of go through those and get rid of those, since I don't do pantos much anymore. And then these three drawers, the first two have thread. This has some art quilt items like Angelina and beads and that kind of thing. And then I have two more of thread over here, and then also in the bottom one. So this whole container has thread in it. So that's all my threads. And the thread brands that I use Signature, YLI, and Superior threads. So those are the thread brands that are in there. And then my fabric is in the other containers, and the majority of them are sorted by color, and except for these containers, this one has, in the middle, has all my hand-dyed batik, or my hand-dyed fabrics. This middle drawer has all my hand-dyed fabrics, and down here there's some hand-dyed on this side, and then on that side it has commercial batiks. And then up here there's some more hand-dyed fabric in there, and also some commercial. And then the rest are, this drawer has some orphan blocks in it from projects that I was working on, and I can show you a little bit of those. These butterfly appliques from the butterfly quilts that I was making, I have a whole stack of those. And then I have some rail blocks and some 4 patches, and then these are some fabric scraps that I haven't put in the correct bin. But since they're all all in one fabric line, I've just kind of kept those together. This is from the Broken Star quilt, so I've kept those all together. And then underneath it I have some cotton sateen for whole cloth quilts. And then here I have some yardage. This is about all I have as far as a significant amount of yardage. There's like 2 to 3 yards in each one of these. And these top fabrics here are fabrics that I ordered for the 1880s quilt top, and then realized that they weren't going to work with that. So I still have the fabrics. I haven't done anything with them. And I ordered different fabric for the 1880s quilt. So there's videos on that quilt. And then there's just more fabric here. And everything, you may have noticed, is folded, and that's a project that I did this winter. I came down here and just folded fabric so it would be easier for me to use. And when I originally started this system, I did fold everything in there, but then over time you know, I just wasn't taking the time to fold fabric and putting it back when I was done using it, and it got to be a mess. So this is all sorted by color. These are my tans and my browns in this drawer. So each drawer has a different color or set of colors. There's blacks and grays here, and then I have yellows down at the bottom, and then we have Christmas fabrics and whites, blues, greens, and then I have purples and pinks over on that end. And then these two top drawers here, these are sewing supplies. There's some embellishments in here, and I do have some stencils in there that I use for quilting, or I did in the past. I haven't used them in a while. And then the next drawer has like Velcro and some more fusible web, some older fusible web. And that is how I store my fabric. Now over on this side again, if you can see under my sewing machine here, of course I have a trash can is right there. This is my rolling sewing machine case for I put my Viking in that when I would take it to Quilt Guild sew-alongs and that kind of thing. And there's another fabric box, and that has some silk clips in it that silk painting artists use those to stretch their silk fabric on frames so that they can paint it. And so that's what that is. I do store things on my quilting table, as long as they're not in the way. Over here is some of the tools that I use most frequently. I have my chalk marking supplies. There's a pounds pad as well as chalk markers and kids chalk, and then those are in this black, right there, the black container. Those are all the chalk markers, and then I have some pens in there. The green one has a few other tools in there. It has extra pins, and then I have my lint roller and that kind of thing. And then on my table I always keep yardsticks on there because I use those underneath the clamps that I clamp to the side of the fabric. Like over here I will clamp that side, and I use those rulers to hold those clamps up so that they don't drag on the machine on the extended base plate. So I have a pantograph on there that I did about 3 or 4 years ago. I did a panto, and it's been there ever since. That's the last time I did a panto. And then I keep mostly have tucked under the plastic. There's a piece of artwork that my son made when he was about 5, and right there is a stencil and my GAM guide. And then I have a couple photographs, some mementos. There's down here I have some pictures. There's one of me and my daughters, and there's my oldest daughter when she was little, and then my 2 daughters when they were a little bit older. This is a photograph of my grandmother and I think some of her, I don't know if it's her sisters or her cousins. I don't know the other ladies in there, but this is my grandmother, and she was a quilter, and I didn't know her. She died when I was 2 years old, and I didn't know she was a quilter until, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe. But this is a quilt that she had hand-pieced. It's that Ocean Waves. She quilted that, or she pieced that, and I quilted it. So I keep photocopies of those here just as mementos. And then I have, this is a picture of a dog that we had as when I was a teenager. Her name was Misty. And then I keep over here next to the machine where the machine parks. Next to where the machine parks, I keep my bobbins and my toa gauge, which is here. My bobbins are all in those 4 rings. And then I currently have the blue arc ruler there. I'm using that on the quilt right now that I'm working on, so that is out. And then I have those brushes I use to clean out the tracks of the machine. The larger ones I use to clean out the tracks of the machine. The smaller one I use to clean out the bobbin case. This one here is a 1-inch, and it works real good to clean lint. I have a screwdriver that takes off the needle plate on the gammal, and then I have 2 smaller screwdrivers, and those I use to change the needles on the machine. And then I have a couple boxes of needles here. So that's about all I keep on the table. I try to keep it cluttered, but it is a table, so when I need to use it, I can. Like, I can lay out fabric on there and double check, make sure I have enough backing fabric for my top. And when I am sewing instead of quilting, I'll use that to lay some of my supplies on while I am sewing at my sewing machine. So that is my studio. It's about half of the size of the basement. The other half is mostly storage. I do have a couple of my vintage machines sitting over there, but so that's about it for my studio. It's not a big place, but it's bigger than some people that I know. They quilt in a smaller space than this. I've got room to walk all the way around my machine, which I think is a blessing, because a lot of people don't have that. They have to have their machines up against a wall on one edge just to get it in their room. Because these machines, you know, they have big tables, and mine is a 14-foot. I bought a 14-foot because it was that was kind of the thing back then when I bought it, and I had the room at the time. I had a different house. I had a bigger basement, and I had room for the 14-foot table. And I'm kind of glad I have it, because like the quilt I have right now, it's large enough that if I did not have it, I probably wouldn't be able to quilt it. If I had a 12-foot table, I would have very little room. I probably wouldn't have room to park my quilt without it sitting over top of the quilt, and I wouldn't like that because it could drip oil on the quilt. So I'm glad I have it, and I know I use it a lot. So you know, I've had this machine since 2002, so I've had it 17 years. I've had very little trouble with it at all, and the trouble I have had has been operator error. It hasn't been anything wrong with the machine. It's just been me learning it. So you know, it's great. I really like this machine. And my studio, as I say, it changes from time to time. I get kind of tired of the way it's set up, or I want to add more decoration to it. Like, I want to put some kind of window treatment on the windows, and the door. I want to paint the door, and I've got a cabinet to put up over the sewing machine, and you know, there's just some storage ideas that I have for storing some things kind of close to where I need them, like the cutting table to keep scissors and my rotary cutters and stuff handy, and yet not always sitting on the table. I'd like to have something to hang them on. So I'm working on ideas for that. But you know, last year, you know, nothing happened as far as organizing, other than I did go through my fabric and I cut back what I was storing, because I had a lot of really tiny pieces. You know, a lot of us quilters, we save all our scraps, and I had too many scraps taking up too much room, and I doubted I was going to use them, so I cleared all those out. It left me more room for the fabric to breathe, so it wasn't all crunched in there and in their drawers. So I think it's better for the fabric anyway. So, and you know, one of these days we may get some kind of flooring down here. I doubt that we'll put a ceiling in other than a drop ceiling. It's kind of handy with the exposed beams, because we can hang lighting, and I can clamp things on there if I need to, you know, like a drop light. I can hang those down there off of those beams, so that kind of comes in handy too. So it may not be pretty, but you know, it's a functional ceiling. I mean, I can do other things with it, so it's not too bad. So that's it for my studio. Hope you enjoyed the tour, and I hope to see you again on the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my newest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.